ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गणन्ति हरिदास. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to squirt souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome, everyone, to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're on chapter 15, the last visit to Keshab, and the date is Wednesday, November 28th, 1883, page 318. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, M was pacing the footpath of the circular road in front of the Lily Cottage, where Keshab Chandra Sen lived. He was eagerly awaiting the arrival of Sri Ramakrishna. This is where Thakur met him the first time, also, at the Lily Cottage. It's, Kamal Kutir. Yeah, that's the name of it. This, I think, was his garden house, not his regular residence. Anyhow, they used to meet there. A lot of the Brahma meetings were there. So M was pacing the footpath of the circular road in front of the Lily Cottage where Keshab Chandra Sen lived. He was eagerly awaiting the arrival of Sri Ramakrishna. Keshab's illness had taken a serious turn, and there was very little chance of his recovery. Since the master loved Keshab dearly, he was coming from Dakshineshwar to pay him a visit. Now, one thing that's very interesting, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. M is not going to say too much, but he's going to be sitting there in the hot sun for 3 hours, something like that, until the Thakur comes, without the slightest bit of annoyance or anything like that. And yeah, in fact, I think in the Bengali it just says a devotee was waiting. I don't think he even talks about. Yeah, he doesn't even say it's him. He's so modest. On the east side of the circular road was Victoria College, where the ladies of Keshab's Brahmo Samaj and their daughters received their education, so all with the English education. To the north of the college was a spacious garden house inhabited by an English family. M noticed that there was a commotion in the house and wondered what was going on. Presently, a hearse arrived with the drivers dressed in black, and the members of the household appeared, looking very sad. There had been a death in the family. Whither does the soul go, living behind this mortal body? Pondering the age-old question, and waited, watching the carriages that came from the north. About 5 o'clock, a carriage stopped in front of the Lily Cottage, and Sri Ramakrishna got out with Latu and several other devotees, including Rakhal. He was received by Keshab's relatives, who led him and the devotees upstairs to the veranda south of the drawing room. The master seated himself on a couch. After a long wait, he became impatient to see Keshab. Keshab's disciple said that he was resting and would be there presently. Sri Ramakrishna became more and more impatient and said to Keshab's disciples, "Look here, what need is there of his coming to me? Why can't I go in and see him?" This restlessness that Thakur has to see him is because of his love, that he really loved Keshab greatly. He used to say, if Keshab isn't there, with whom will I speak when I go to Calcutta? He had so many devotees in Calcutta that he loved dearly. So we consider that Balaram Bose was there, and Ramchandra, so many people were there. But he had this really special love for Keshab, and Keshab loved him very much. And Thakur said on various occasions that he would do special offerings and wanted him to do it at the Siddheshwari Kalibari, Tontonia. that if the Divine Mother would allow Keshab to recover, that he would offer this dab chini, this coconut water. So they're being formal. That Thakur is a respected guest, that he should wait there, and then Keshab should become a little presentable, and he can come out, and a little bit formalities, which in Thakur was not necessary. He could just go to his bedside and see him. Prasanna humbly, Sir, he will come in a few minutes. Master, go away. It is you who are making all this fuss. Let me go in. Prasanna began to talk about Keshab in order to divert the master's attention. He said, Keshab is now an altogether different person. Like you, sir, he talks to the Divine Mother. He hears what the Mother says. He laughs and cries. When he was told that Keshab talked to the Divine Mother and laughed and cried, the master became ecstatic. Presently, he went into samadhi. It was winter, and the master was wearing a green flannel coat with a shawl thrown over it. He sat straight, with his eyes fixed, deep in ecstasy. A long time passed in this way. There was no indication of his returning to the normal plane of consciousness. We have one of the photographs is with Thakur wearing that kind of waistcoat, green coat. I think it's in M's house also. Some of Thakur's things are kept there. Gradually it became dark. Lamps were lighted in the drawing room, where the master was now to go. While he was slowly coming down to the plane of ordinary consciousness, he was taken there, though with great difficulty. The room was well furnished. At the sight of the furniture, the master muttered to himself, These things were necessary before, but of what use are they now? What is the meaning of all this? See, Keshab, he had to meet with very distinguished people, and sometimes Westerners and everything wouldn't be used to sitting on the floor. They would have chairs and tables and everything. But now that Keshab is coming to the end of his life, that means that all these formalities are no longer necessary. Seeing Rakali said, Oh, hello, are you here? Then, seating himself on a couch, he again lost consciousness of the outer world. And looking around as if seeing someone, he said, Hello, mother. I see that you too have come. How you are showing off in your Benares sari. Don't bother me now, please. Sit down and be quiet. And the master was in a state of intense divine intoxication. In the well-lighted room, the Brahmo devotee sat around the master. Latu, Rakal, and M remained near him. He was saying to himself, still filled with divine fervor, the body and the soul. The body was born and it will die. But for the soul there is no death. It is like the betel nut. When the nut is ripe, it does not stick to the shell. But when it is green, it is difficult to separate it from the shell. After realizing God, one does not identify oneself anymore with the body. Then one knows that body and soul are two different things. Okay, now there are a lot of things in this. The Thakur is talking about the Deha and Atma. Here, this is the term. When in English, when we read soul, we're never quite sure if it's referring to Atman or if it's referring to Jiva or even subtle body. It's not always clear. We have so many different ways of understanding this relationship between the self and the non-self, and between the subtle body and the physical body, and between the jiva and the physical body. So very complex arrangement that we have, and this idea that this relationship can change, that in the unripe state, that there seems to be this connection. When we get the ripe state, then there's a perfect separation between the body and the self and the Atman. Now, does that mean that they're not two separate things always? They are. So now this is from that point of view of our own individual attachment and self-identification and understanding. When we read in Gita about this relationship, we see that sometimes Sri Krishna speaks in terms of the Atman, and sometimes as the Dehi, the indweller Jivatman. So he'll talk about the Jivatman that will take another birth in another body and everything, and at the same time talk about the Atman as never being born and never dying. So sometimes it's confusing to people. We have this illustration that Thakur gives of the onion, and this is the Pancha Kosha doctrine. I think this is very helpful. That we have different layers to the onion, and they can be peeled off. Now, are they connected, these different layers? Huh? It feels like it. If you ever try to cut an onion and take the outer skin off, sometimes it's very hard to do it. It seems stuck to it. You almost have to take out two of them to get rid of it, the little brown stuff. And sometimes it pulls right off easily. Depends on the type of onion and everything. So the relationship between the Annamaya kosha, the body, and the more interior ones is that they can be separated, but not easily separated. And it depends on our own spiritual understanding, and it also depends at the time of death, different things happen. So in theory, we should be able to peel these off. Now, this is what we do when we practice as vichara, this type of path of discrimination. We try to separate all of these different levels, personality levels, and body, personality, and everything. So when we peel off all of the different layers, we're trying to get to the self inside. And when we peel off the last one, then we just have an empty space. Now, this is the Advaitic idea. Advaita Vedanta will say that there is no self. There is no self as a limited being. There is no jiva, really. Once we've transcended all of the different koshas, the different coverings of the self, and that little space within my onion and little space within your onion, they're one. There's only space. Space can't be separated. So that's the infinite absolute. That's the real self. That's the real Atman. But if we're talking about at the time of death, what happens at the time of death? Then somehow this physical body, that outer layer of the onion, that will really become separated. And the interior ones will find a new outer layer. So what is this jiva? This jiva is that same self, which is really infinite, absolute, unborn, but with some type of connection. And this connection is always some type of identification. Some type of identification. So now, the difference between a God-realized soul and an ordinary soul will be that they know the separation is real. So this idea, we have the idea of a betel nut or a coconut. Thakur uses both illustrations. When the water dries up inside of a coconut, that means ignorance vanishes. Then it becomes separate. The kernel becomes separate from the outer shell. You can shake it. You can hear that they're not connected anymore. Now, the relationship between the body and the self, or even the jiva and the real self, that doesn't change. This is simply our understanding of it has changed. If I'm identified with it, then it's as if it's connected and very hard to separate it. When you open up a coconut that still has the water inside, it's very hard to pry off the meat of the coconut from the outer shell. So that means it's not any change in the real relationship between the body and the self. It's a change in understanding. That's all. So those who have realized this separation is as if they don't feel any connection, that they know the self is separate. Now, what does that mean? That means that it doesn't mean that if you hit me that I won't feel it, but I won't be identified with it. I'll know that I'm something separate from that. So this is that state of God realization. And when we talk about this jiva taking a new body, somehow this the subtle body is the mind, the intellect, senses to some degree. This all of our old samskaras, karma, and all of that finds a new body somehow. But the self is unattached and unchanged in the midst of all of this. That's the sun. Sun is not going to change at all. It'll get reflected in a new container with the water, and that new container will have the old samskaras from the previous life. This is one way we can try to understand these things. Yeah. Only the body. Yeah. Now, the way we're constituted now, it's very hard to separate the body from the pranamaya kosha and the pranamaya kosha from manomaya kosha. They're all interrelated. But somehow, at the time of death, the annamaya kosha, the body, the outer covering, that will completely fall off. So whether we're God realized or not God realized, that separation will take place at the time of death. That separation takes place at the time of sleep and dream also, but in a slightly different way, of course. But so the point is that this outer shell, outer skin of the onion can be removed without the inner other layers of the onion being affected. So that will continue somehow. So let me read this again. The master, he was saying to himself, still filled with divine fervor, the body and the soul. So now there's Atman. So this is the real self. The body was born and it will die, but for the soul there is no death. Now we're talking about the jiva. Then the jiva, if we say the jiva, many times I've died and many times I've been born again. As Sri Krishna says. So this jiva, the indweller, seems to be reborn. We talk about who is reborn. We talk about rebirth. Who is reborn? It won't be the Atman. It'll be the jiva. But the Atman and the jiva are not two different things. It's just the coverings and the false identification. That's the only difference.
The mind and the senses, the subtle body.
Yeah, if we think of the Kathopanishad with the chariot, that the rider inside the chariot is the jiva. That chariot can break down. He can go out. He can take another chariot. When he's not connected with the chariot, he's the Atman. He's the Atman the whole time. But when he's within that complex body, mind, senses, and everything, then that's the jiva. The body was born and it will die, but for the soul there is no death. It is like the betel nut. When the nut is ripe, it does not stick to the shell. So that means that when ignorance dries up, then we have no attachment. We know that we're separate, even though we're separate, whether we know it or not. But it's that false understanding that we're trying to get rid of. There's no change. If the Atman has to become immortal, it has to become separate. It can't. It has to be eternally that way. So it's just our understanding of it. But when it is green, it is difficult to separate it from the shell. That means in our ordinary state of identification, it's very hard for us to think of ourselves as separate from the body. And if we can do that, it's even harder to think of ourselves as separate from our personality and our habits and our character and all the different tendencies, likes and dislikes. How do we separate ourselves from all of that? Only if we think of ourselves as the witness, as a real self. After realizing God, one does not identify oneself anymore with the body. Then he knows that body and soul are two different things. At this moment, Keshab entered the room. Now remember, Thakur was just talking to himself then, in that state of divine fervor. Keshab entered the room. He came through the east door. Those who remembered the man who had preached in the town hall or the Brahma Samaj temple. Town hall was probably the biggest, venue, in those days that anyone could speak. Yeah, Keshab was really so world renowned. Even the fact that he went and met Queen Victoria was a very big thing. So Keshab really could command a huge audience. He was a very good speaker, they said, very charismatic, and a good person. He's simple in his own way, especially towards the end. We see that others had a little jealousy, maybe towards Thakur, some hesitation or this and that. He didn't have that. Of course, he changed so much. This is what they're saying. He changed so much through contact with Sri Ramakrishna, and people change when they get close to death. All of the old things, the name and fame and the organization and the reputation, all of that doesn't mean anything at the time of death. So people change also towards the end. We wonder sometimes, what did he actually die from? I don't know. Yeah. In those days, nobody knew always, right? That he would have been just in his late 40s at this time, not that old. Yeah. Those who remembered the man who had preached in the town hall or the Brahmo Samaj temple were shocked to see the skeleton covered with skin. He could hardly stand. He walked holding to the wall for support. With great difficulty, he sat down in front of the couch. In the meantime, Sri Ramakrishna had got down from the couch and was sitting on the floor. See, even being so sick, out of respect, that he wanted to sit at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna, and out of respect also, he wanted to sit on the floor on the same level with Keshab. So in the meantime, Sri Ramakrishna had got down from the couch and was sitting on the floor. Keshab bowed low before the master and remained in that position. See, Keshab's disciples never liked it. They thought, why is he bowing down before Sri Ramakrishna? Everyone bows down before him. Of course, they didn't have that pranam method, but they showed him that respect. But he didn't have that pride like that. Keshab bowed low before the master and remained in that position a long time, touching the master's feet with his forehead. Then he sat up. It's really one of the touching chapters. We try to picture this. I was reading this this afternoon before meditation. So when I was sitting for meditation, I was thinking about this scene. It's a very touching scene. And yes, especially we know whenever it gets dark out, always Thakur goes into a spiritual mood. Just the mere fact that the sun is going down, that it triggers something in him. And he always said that at the time of sunset, the Sandhya period, to stop all your work and think of God at that time. So Keshab bowed low before the master and remained in that position a long time, touching the master's feet with his forehead. Then he sat up. Sri Ramakrishna was still in a state of ecstasy. He muttered to himself. He talked to the Divine Mother. Raising his voice, Keshab said, I am here, sir, I am here. He took Sri Ramakrishna's left hand and stroked it gently, but the master was in deep samadhi, completely intoxicated with divine love. See, he came only to see Keshab, and now he's completely lost to the world. A stream of words came from his lips as he talked to himself, and the devotees listened to him spellbound. Master, as long as a man associates himself with upadhis, so long he sees the manifold, such as Keshab, Prasanna, Amrita, and so on. But on attaining perfect knowledge, he sees only one consciousness everywhere. Upadhi. This is a technical term that means any quality that gets superimposed upon the real self, that's foreign from it, but appears to belong to it. We have two concepts, upadhi and adhyasa. These always go hand in hand. The term upadhi in general can just mean any quality that belongs to something, but it's something that is can be added on and can be removed. It's something that isn't essential to something. So if you get a degree, you get a PhD, then you can add the upadhi doctor. If you become a great scholar, then they have all these different Mahamaho, all these different upadhis that they add to it. These are they don't change anything, but they give us a feeling that something is different. So in Vedanta, the real upadhi to the self will be these five coverings, that they don't belong to it. The coconut is always dry. The coconut is always separate in reality. It's just that we don't realize it. So we identify with it. So upadhi means a false identification. What is it we identify with? And we take it as belonging when it doesn't belong. The example that I like best is when you place a red rose behind a crystal. Then the redness seems to belong to the crystal, but the redness doesn't enter into it. If it really did, if it really belonged to it, you could remove the rose and the crystal would still look red. But as soon as you remove it, you see that it has no color at all. So that's the self. It has no color at all. It takes the color of this upadhi, which is the personality and the mind and body and all of that. So for Keshab, part of this upadhi will be leader of the Brahma Samaj. It's not just this physical body, but all the things that we identify with. So Sri Ramakrishna didn't have any of that. If he had any upadhi, anything he identified with, it was the fact that he was a child of the Divine Mother, which was necessary for him to live in the world. And this is the part of that vidyamaya, and that ripe ego. So as long as a man associates himself with upadhis, with body, mind, and senses, and with our position in the world, our occupation, is a great upadhi. Yeah, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm an electrician. We identify with it. That's who I am. That becomes a upadhi that way. Or even just with our name and so with Keshab, Prasanna, Amrita, and so on. But on attaining perfect knowledge, he sees only one consciousness everywhere. Now, this is very hard for us to understand, because if we think, what is consciousness? It's awareness. How do we see consciousness? So we have to understand somehow we see everything as a manifestation of consciousness or a projection of consciousness somehow. If we think of this when we go to sleep at night and we have a dream, and there's a whole dream universe, if we know it's a dream, then we can see that everything is nothing but consciousness taking some apparent physical form. Something like that. And unless we have that experience, we won't know exactly what it's like. But this was Sri Ramakrishna's direct experience. This wasn't philosophical theory for him or anything like that.
But Swami, just when they say that they see God and all, it's the same, right?
No, these are two things actually. Seeing God and all, seeing everything as Brahman. These are two slightly different things because when we see an individual, uh, we can see that the divine presence is within them as consciousness, which represents their self. The physical body that I'm looking at, that we can say is some projection of consciousness, the consciousness taking some type of form, but it's not exactly the same. If you think of the dream, huh, that your existence in the dream and the existence of the objects in the dream are two different things. When the dream disappears, everything disappears, but the I, who is the actor in the dream, doesn't disappear. That I wakes up as the sleeper and the dreamer. So there's a different. This is why we can say that this whole physical universe is the manifestation of consciousness and at the same time transitory and unreal and dreamlike and will disappear at some point. There's not a contradiction. But the self within, that's one with Brahman. That's absolute. That remains. So if we have a dream, the I of the actor in the dream is not a projection. The dream is a projection. The individual body is a projection, but that I within is not a projection. It's the dreamer itself, who is also the sleeper. It's the Brahman itself. Brahman as the dreamer is Ishvara, or Divine Mother, Shakti. Thakur will talk about this Shakti thing. So this is always a confusion. That why Thakur says that everything is pure consciousness. To see Brahman everywhere, and Shankaracharya will say everything is false, illusory, vitya, like a dream. But Thakur will he'll always say that this is a stage in spiritual life when we try to see everything. And even when we see everything as manifestation of consciousness, we still know that it's yes, there's a momentary existence. We still know that. So ultimately, there's no real contradiction. Shankaracharya's position, Thakur says, is a stage as we're trying to separate the real from the unreal. Everything's mixed up. We're trying to separate the upadhi from the real substance, from the vastu. Once we've done that, then we can see everything as that same divine source.
So we are able to see through the avarana shakti, vikshepa shakti, that we see.
Yeah, there's avarana shakti, vikshepa shakti. This simply means that uh, when we look within, uh, we want to understand our true nature, that we find that it's covered over somehow, that we don't recognize ourselves as the Atman, as pure consciousness. And there's all of these human qualities and characteristics have been superimposed on that. Now, if we're talking about this external universe, then it's harder to understand. I like to take all of these things in terms of self knowledge. If we're talking about this, I'm really looking at consciousness. It's been painted over, and other things have been put on top of it. It's hard for me to understand that concept. I can only know consciousness as the self. I don't have any other way of understanding it really. When we have this mystic vision, then we may be able to see this consciousness pulsating through everything, and that's a different story. But with regard to the self, we can understand it. I know what consciousness means because I'm a conscious being. I know that. I know that when I see things, that they're seen. When I hear things, they're heard. When I say things, they're said. I know that. You can't convince me that consciousness is false somehow. That's the one thing you can't convince me of. You might be able to convince me this whole thing is a dream, but I know that there's an experiencer of all that, and that's not somebody other than myself. I know that. The status of this external universe is a different type of thing. That's not given to us to be able to understand in any way other than some type of God vision, some entering into some deeper state somehow. Uh, so seeing this whole universe as a manifestation of Brahman is one thing, but seeing Brahman dwelling within all beings as the real self, that we can do because we understand it within ourselves. So we can understand that within everyone else. So perfect knowledge, but on attaining perfect knowledge, he sees only one consciousness everywhere. The same perfect knowledge, again, makes him realize that the one consciousness has become the universe and its living beings. So now has become. See, the language is a little bit different. See, Brahman doesn't become the individual jiva. Brahman is. There's a slight distinction here. Has become the universe and its living beings and the 24 cosmic principles. Now, in a little while, Thakur is going to say that it's Shakti that becomes the universe, not Brahman. But in his eyes, there's no difference, ultimate difference. These are all very fine philosophical points. The objection to Brahman becoming the universe is that Brahman is changeless. So they get around this somehow by saying Shakti is something called Shakti Parinamavad. The doctrine is that everything is an evolution of Shakti. Shakti can change. But the Shakti belongs to Brahman. There's no ultimate distinction. So these are the types of things that the philosophers argue about. For us, they're not very important. We say that the whole universe is a point of view, and the Sankhya point of view, and Vedantic point of view, they all overlap and kind of mix in with each other in different ways. Even in the Upanishads, there's so much of Sankhya is there. And these are just, if we understand these as different points of view, it's okay. If we understand these as conflicting philosophical positions, then I think we're missing the point of all of this. There are helpful ways of understanding these things, all of them. Even Sankhya, which is dualistic, is very helpful. And Thakur talks about it all the time, these 24 cosmic principles. This belongs to Sankhya, this idea. And they evolve in everything. According to Sankhya, they're real. They can't be resolved back into Purusha or Brahman itself. What do we care? Is that such a burning issue? But for the philosophers, it's life and death. We can't stand any type of dualism if we're not dualists and everything. But anyhow, for us, we're trying to realize some what is our true nature, what is the nature of God. This universe will always be a mystery. It'll always be a mystery. We can't imagine. We can't expect to try to understand what is the real nature of this external universe. We only know it as it appears in the mind, anyhow. That's why there's so many different theories about how the universe comes into existence and everything. So that same perfect knowledge again makes him realize this is the person of perfect knowledge, that the one consciousness has become the universe and its living beings and the 24 cosmic principles, but the manifestations of divine power are different in different beings. It is he, undoubtedly, who has become everything, but in some cases there is a greater manifestation than in others. It is not such a difficult idea that the power of the ocean is greater in a huge wave than in a small wave. It's not such a. There was always an objection that this is partiality in the part of God, something like that. Thakur, he'll talk about Vidyasagar, but it wasn't just him. The Brahmas also. Vaishamya dosha, they use this term, that the fault of partiality. You mean to say that God gave somebody more power than one person and less than Thakur's answer is that the divine presence is fully there within all beings. But Shakti is a different thing. And the coverings to this divine presence allow it to be seen more easily in some people and allow it to be completely covered in others. This is the lampshade theory. The same light is within all beings, but it doesn't shine through if the lampshade is very dark. And some it's perfectly clear, and we see it shine through completely. Vidyasagar once said to me, "Can it be true that God has endowed some with greater power and some with less?" I replied, "If that were not so, how is it that one man may be stronger than 50? If that were not the case, again, how is it that we have all come here to see you?" Yet Thakur was always surprised. Such intelligent people, how do they hold such a strange idea that everyone has to have the same amount of power? Does everyone have the same intelligence? Does everyone have the same ability to sing or to play an instrument or to do sports and athletics? Everyone is different. This is the variety is the essence of this manifestation. The soul through which God sports is endowed with his special power. The soul through which God sports is endowed with his special power. Now we're talking about the avatar or these Ishwarakotis or those who have some special mission in life or some special power, something like that. Now we're getting to a whole different side of things a little bit. The landlord may reside in any part of his estate, but he is generally to be found in a particular drawing room. The devotee is God's drawing room. So there'll be a special manifestation in the devotee, someone who loves God. Even more in these Ishwarakotis, even more in the avatar. But Thakur talks about this, the heart of the devotee is the Vaitokana, the drawing room of God. And then really you'll find the master sitting there, relaxing, leaning back, and enjoying himself and everything. The devotee is God's drawing room. God loves to sport in the heart of his devotee. It is there that his special power is manifest. Now, why doesn't he love to sport in everybody's heart? We're blocking it. It's not God. It's us. We're not giving any room there. The room is all cluttered. It's not very clean. It's not in the proper condition for anybody to sit there. But once it's clean, automatically it's filled with God. This is not God sitting up somewhere and saying, "Oh, is this heart good enough for me to enter into?" These are automatic things. If we cleanse the heart, automatic, we feel. There's a question of feeling again because the divine presence is there. But are we aware of it? That's the whole point. What is the sign of such a devotee? When you see a man doing great works, you may know that God's special power is manifested through him. Thakur always, he liked this one verse from the Gita, this is Vibhuti Yoga. It says, wherever you see any special manifestation of anything, of intelligence, of skillfulness, artistic things, then know that I dwell there. Some special manifestation of the divine is there. The primordial power and the supreme Brahman are identical. Okay, this Adya Shakti. Now, how do we understand this Adya Shakti and supreme Brahman? In a sense, it's like saying Ishwara, Adya Shakti. We may say Divine Mother, we may say Ishwara, we may say the Saguna Brahman, that they're not two separate things. And I like this idea of the dreamer and the sleeper. That sleeper is always has to be present. When the sleeper becomes a dreamer, is he no longer a sleeper? And are they two different people? The same person who's dreaming is also sleeping at the same time. That means unchanging, just pure consciousness. At the same time, that this power that belongs to it is projecting a whole dream and entering into it and observing it and witnessing it. At the same time, he's still sleeping. So they're not two, the sleeper and the dreamer are not two separate things. So the Adya Shakti will be the dreamer because it's nothing but the sleeper with the power to project a dream. So they're identical. You can never think of the one without the other. Can we imagine a dreamer without a sleeper? We can imagine a sleeper without a dreamer if we didn't know about dreams, but we know about dreams. So we know if someone's sleeping, the potential for that dream has to be there. You can never think of the one without the other. They are like the gem and its brilliance. One cannot think of the brilliance without the gem, or of the gem without its brilliance. Again, it is like the snake and its wriggling motion. One cannot think of the wriggling motion without the snake, or the snake without its wriggling motion. Now, this is where he says, it is the primordial power, Adya Shakti, that has become the universe and its living beings. Now, why does he say before that it's Brahman? Here he says that it's this primordial power.
Different state.
They're identical. They're identical. So, do we want to say that the sleeper is the one projecting this the dream, or the dreamer? There's not much difference. Huh? The sleeper as the dreamer, or if, as long as it's there, then we can take the dream. So this is Brahman. Uh, when Brahman projects this universe, then we have this duality of creator and creation. That's there. When the creation is gone, the creator is gone as creator, but remains as the Brahman. Right? So the mother and the child. The mother's a woman the whole time. So we want to say that the woman gave birth to the child or the mother gave birth to the child. Doesn't become a mother until the child's born. Doesn't make any difference. So from Thakur's point of view, is more or less the same. We say that Brahman is manifest in the universe, or this primordial power manifests as the universe. Mother gives birth to the child, or the woman gives birth to the child and becomes a mother. There's a bit of just a semantic difference. It's not a very important type of difference. But for the philosopher, this saves Brahman. Okay, so it's okay now. Brahman didn't undergo any change. It was this is the Shakti that underwent a change, so I can live with that one. So the philosophers, they come up with these different theories. It is the primordial power that has become the universe and its living beings and the 24 cosmic principles. It is a case of involution and evolution. Now we're getting into Sankhya philosophy again. There's a footnote. That is to say, before the creation, the universe and its living beings and the 24 cosmic principles lie involved in the primordial power. And after the creation, these gradually evolved from it. So from the Sankhya point of view, this is the avyakta. This is the unmanifest state. The unmanifest state, pralaya, is an unmanifest state. Is not just an empty state. It's the same as when we go to sleep at night. When we go to sleep at night, then everything that's in our memory bank and in our conscious mind and everything that gets involved in this causal body, which is alone there sleeping. And when we wake up again, it evolves out and comes back again. So the fact that we go to sleep and without any dream, we just go to sleep, nothing disappears. It just goes into a potential state and then comes back, seed state, something like that. So when the Sankhya idea, when this universe comes to an end, that everything that will be necessary for it to come back in the next cycle will be in seed form. And then the evolution will come out of that. So we have a tree, and it grows to a great height, and it lives for a long time, and it drops some seeds. The tree itself may die, but the seed will contain everything to have another tree just like that one. So evolution and involution. Thakur uses this terminology. Why do I feel so restless for Rakal, Narendra, and the other youngsters? Now remember, he hasn't even said, "Oh, Keshab, how are you feeling?" Huh?
Mhm.
Half the time he's talking to himself, or they're just talking to the room or something. In this divine state. Why do I feel so restless for Rakal, Narendra, and the other youngsters? Hazara once asked me. Hazara was always a troublemaker and putting doubts in Thakur's mind. When will you think of God if you are always anxious about these boys? Keshav and the others smiled. That worried me greatly. Why should it worry him? Because he had a childlike nature. Very simple. Thakur was simple that way. I, pr- I prayed to the Divine Mother. Mother, see what a fix I am in. Hasra scolds me, and scolds me because I worry about these young men. Afterwards, I asked Bholanath about it. Bholanath was another one of the temple workers, or I know priest, or one of the workers there. He said to me that such a state of mind is described in the Mahabharata. How else will a man established in samadhi occupy his mind in the phenomenal world after coming down from samadhi? That is why he seeks the company of devotees endowed with sattva. I gave a sigh of relief when Bholanath told me of the Mahabharata. Yet Thakur always said that coming down from that state, that he lived with bhakti and bhakta, that he needed that devotional attitude, that devotional mood, and the company of devotees. These were the two things that kind of sustained him, allowed him to keep his mind on the slightly lower plane. Asura is not to blame. During the period of struggle, one should follow the method of discrimination. Not this, not this. Okay, so this is what we sometimes take to be Shankaracharya's final position, that there's Sat and Asat. There's the real and there's the false. That they're two separate categories. This whole universe turns out to be mithya. It turns out to be false and everything. Thakur was saying that this is just uh, at the time of sadhana, when we practice this type of discrimination, when we want to separate that which is eternal and unchanging from that which is transitory. The transitory means unreal. This is a definition of real sat, is that it doesn't change. That it's and the same past, present, and future actually means beyond time. It's all time is within that consciousness itself. So during the period of struggle, one should follow the method of discrimination, not this, and direct the whole mind to God. But the state of perfection is quite different. So Thakur makes a big distinction between that attitude that we have in order to isolate the real self. It's mixed up now. That once we've had that realization, then our vision changes. He makes a big distinction between this the state of sadhana, the state of realization, and the state of vijnana. After that, coming back down again, our vision changes again. But the state of perfection is quite different. After reaching God, one reaffirms what formerly one denied. To extract butter, you must separate it from the buttermilk. Then you discover that butter and buttermilk are intrinsically related to one another. There's no difference. The same, you do a chemical analysis, huh? It'll be the same thing, just in a different state. They belong to the same stuff. The butter is not essentially different from the buttermilk, nor the buttermilk essentially different from the butter. After realizing God, one knows definitely that it is He who has become everything. In some objects, He is manifested more clearly, and in others, less clearly. When a flood comes from the ocean, all the land is deep underwater. Before the flood, the boat could have reached the ocean only by following the winding course of a river. But after the flood, one can row straight to the ocean. One need not take a roundabout course. After the harvest has been reaped, one need not take the roundabout course along the bulk of the field. One can cross the field at any point. These are two examples that Thakur gives for Vaidhi Bhakti and Raga Bhakti, Anuraga. That at the time of sadhana that we have to follow a definite path, and we have to follow all the rules and everything. I like this example because I had this nice experience in Bangladesh. Yeah, I've told this many times, but it was such a nice experience. Uh, there's a village, quite a large village called Baniachang. It's supposed to be the largest village in South Asia, in fact. And the town nearby is called Habiganj. And it's not far, but the first time I went, we had to take such a roundabout way, and you take these ferries and this and that, and then you take a little boat, and you really have to follow this winding river all, the whole way, and these dirt roads and everything, and it took about 2 hours, and it was very difficult. I thought, wow, they go just from there to there because it's not that far. Second time I went, it was like I was in a completely different place. It was the rainy season, and there was so much water that we took one big boat straight. Didn't have to, couldn't even see the river, the banks of the river the way it was before. There was so much water, and the first time you see all of these houses at the top of a mound, right? And the paddy fields all around, and everything dry. And I see these boats are there. Why are these boats there? I couldn't imagine. And then you see in the rainy season that it's just these like little islands, and they go from one place to the other by boat, or they have these little bridges, or these little rope bridges and things like that. So this is Thakur's illustration that at the time of spiritual practice, then we have to follow all the different ins and outs and all of the different types of spiritual practices that we have to do. And once this flood of divine love comes, we throw out all ritual. We don't have to bother about doing so much of japa, so much of meditation, uh, puja, and everything. Heart is filled with love, is overflowing. So then we go straight. So these are two of the examples that he gives for that. After the realization of God, he is seen in all beings, but his greater manifestation is in man. Again, among men, God manifests himself more clearly in those devotees who are sattvic, in those who have no desire whatever to enjoy lust and gold. Where can a man of samadhi rest his mind after coming down from the plane of samadhi? That is why he feels the need of seeking the company of pure-hearted devotees endowed with sattva and free from attachment to lust and gold. How else could such a person occupy himself in the relative plane of consciousness? So let's stop here. This is the teachings that Thakur is giving here. He gives in many places. The specialty of this is that we can just picture how Thakur is sitting in the divine state. Keshab is there. It's just skin and bones. Both of them sitting on the floor, facing each other, hardly aware of anybody else in the room. He's hardly aware of what he's saying. And just in some divine state, these words are flowing forth, and he as if, and this was his conviction, of course. The Divine Mother was supplying all of these words, and they're just flowing out of him. So it's really a very beautiful, beautiful section. Okay, we'll stop here. That's page 321. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanugam Bhatudvikraham Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasanamama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Okay, thank you, everyone. They're okay. Oh, yeah, people do say things. Okay, good. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
How long before Keshab died?
I don't know. I think it was probably